Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about why the gun always has to be pointed in a safe direction. And a lot, before you guys say, well, duh, right? I was actually at a competition gun range over the summer, okay? Where the standard procedure right now, this was a competition range. Most of these guys had like these competition bolt action rifles, and I do not like competition only guns. We'll do a separate video on that. But everybody had these bolt action rifles, and the procedure was that they would shoot the gun, right? Let's say they're shooting downrange. When they were done shooting, they would remove the bolt from the rifle, okay? Now, while people are standing over here and the bolt has been removed, they were handling the rifle with the gun pointed into the crowd of people, right? And placing it on the gun rack, right? So the gun racks were set up so that they were pointing back into the people back here, into the parking area, into the crowd, okay? This isn't even a safety issue, right? The range rules were that the bolt had to be removed, okay? But once the bolt was removed, they were pointing the gun towards the people and handling it. Now, this is different than if the gun is on the table, inert, right? Like everybody, we call a ceasefire. Gun's on the table, nobody's allowed to touch the gun, and people are downrange setting up their targets. I'm perfectly fine with that. That's normal, standard procedures in all the places I've operated. But while people are downrange, nobody's allowed to put their hands on the gun. You can load magazines, you can play with your ammo, but you cannot touch the gun. Okay. The only exception to that, right, would be if you have an AR, right, which has been taken apart and broken down into two halves. Okay. So here's the thing: when this is in two halves, okay, now this is obviously half of a gun, right? This is now a gun part, okay? So this is obvious, okay? When you have a bolt action rifle and all you do is remove the bolt, it's not obvious that the bolt has been removed. Now, again, this isn't a safety issue. I'm gonna explain that in a second. It's a different type of safety issue. So let me put this back together. So this isn't an issue to the extent that I think that there could ever be an accident at that range, right? Because everybody at that range knows that they got to remove the bolt before they turn the gun around and point it back into the crowd, okay? The issue I have with this, okay, is I have been training myself for years, right, that if I see a muzzle pointed at me, right, and I train beginners, I've supervised gun ranges, I don't always know if the gun is not loaded. In fact, I'm always going to assume that it is loaded. And if I see a muzzle start to swing in my direction, I want to move my ass, right? I want to be like, whoa, what are you doing? Get that out of my way. So I have built up a reflex, right, where if the muzzle of a gun, right, or what appears to be a gun, starts moving in my direction, I'm going to immediately react, okay? I'm going to move fast, I'm going to make a lot of noise, and I'm going to yell at people. And that keeps me alive, okay? So I need to maintain that reflex. So I didn't want to go back to this range, okay? I have no intention of ever going back to this range where you got these competition shooters that are pointing what appears to be a gun, because remember, it's not half a gun, it's a bolt gun, so you can't see that the bolt has been removed. Even if it has been removed, it still looks like a gun, okay? So if these guys are pointing what appears to be like a gun at me, okay, what's going to happen is if I see that enough times, I'm going to lose that reflex that I've developed over the years to move my ass out of the way. And that's the reason why I can't be at a gun range like that. Because if I get used to guns being pointed at me and not moving, sooner or later, that might get me shot, okay? So I need to maintain that reflex where as soon as I see a muzzle pointed at me, I'm moving, yelling, screaming, you know, acting like that's a loaded gun being pointed at me, okay? So even though, like I said, this isn't a safety feature to the, this isn't a safety issue to the extent that I think anybody's actually pointed a loaded gun with a, you know, a gun with a bolt and that's loaded with ammo at me. And I don't think that they would ever have an accident, right? But the problem there is that if I'm there and I lose that split section reaction and I go to a different gun range and now I no longer have that immediate reaction, that can get me hurt somewhere else, okay? So just something for you guys to consider if you go to these competition ranges with these bolt action FUD guns where they take the bolt out, right? Let's take the bolt out of this thing, right? So if I take the bolt out of this AR, right? Wait, I've taken the bolt out, okay? Can you tell that this has a bolt removed from it, okay? If you see this starting to move in your direction, you better move the shit out of the way, okay? So it's one thing if the gun is like split into two obvious halves where it's obvious that it's not a gun. It's not obvious that the bolt has been removed from this gun, okay? So I don't want to be at a gun range where anything that looks like a gun is pointing in my direction and people are holding it. It's one thing if it's like on the table, like, again, we do, you know, we call a ceasefire, we put the gun on the table. Yes, now people can walk down range. Nobody's allowed to touch the gun until everybody gets behind the firing line, okay? But I don't want to be at a location where I'm back there and people are pointing what appears to be a gun in my direction. And I don't care if the bolt's been removed out of the gun or not. This appears to be an intact gun, and that's messing with my reflex, okay? So something for you guys to consider if you go to these competition ranges where they do that kind of thing. You know, there's 3 safety rules that I live by. It's kept me alive all these years. Number 1, guns always point in the safe direction. Number 2, fingers off the trigger until you're shooting. Number 3, we treat all guns like they're loaded. Okay, so those are your 3 safety rules. Okay, so drop some comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and we'll talk again soon.